My name's Dan Jacobsen, and I'm here to talk to you about a new technology in pig diagnostics. So pig health is an important factor for the pork industry. Over the last 40 years, we've been increasing our pork production, and we're actually up to about 100 million head each year annually. But at the same time, we've actually decreased the number of farms, and that's led to an overall increase in density of about 240%. So think of doubling the number of seats in a movie theater or the number of people in your house. You start to see some of the discomfort and problems that are occurring with the increase in density. And one of the biggest problems that's occurring is an increase in disease. Over $800 million each year is lost in the US due to pig disease. But where it can really hurt the most is actually on the individual farm level. 75% of a farm's profits can be lost from a severe outbreak. Because of the increase in disease, the industry has moved towards an increase in testing as well. Healthy farms mean greater profits for the individual farms. And catching those diseases early leads to better treatment and management options. And so the testing for the farms is actually used more on a farm level decision-making process. Think of it less like a patient going to a doctor and more like governors or mayors during COVID who are watching the rising case in populations and need to make decisions about whether to close cities or provide other measures that might hurt the economy but might protect the individual populations. And it's the same thing on farms. They need to make these decisions to protect pig health while at the same time trying to make sure they don't lose too much money from it. The current method for testing is accurate but slow. First, a farmer has to spy strange behavior in the herds, and they'll call in a veterinarian. Between the farmer and the vet, they'll take a sample, with one of the most popular ones today being oral fluids shown in the photo on the left. That's where pigs chew on a rope, and after about 20 or 30 minutes, they wring out the rope into a sample container, and that sample is then shipped overnight to a nearby diagnostic lab. There are some private ones in the US, but the largest ones are actually public research universities, with Iowa State and University of Minnesota being two of the biggest. And those research universities will perform PCR testing, which we've all heard of from COVID. And that's a great method in terms of accuracy, but because of the overnight shipping and everything else, it's about 24-hour turnaround at best. And in addition, half of the money cost of the test is actually from shipping and administrative fees. And because of this slow turnaround, it just gives more time for more pigs to get sick and cause more problems. Our solution at Pignostics is to provide testing on the farm. The tests test for the most common viral pig illnesses and can be run on the farm in about 90 minutes or less. It starts with the same oral fluid collection by the pigs chewing on the ropes and the samples being wrung out into a container. Then you load the sample onto the Pignostics chip, which is inserted to the Pignostics device, and after about 90 minutes, you get the result. The device will be small, about the size of a microwave, so easily able to fit on a benchtop or desktop in the office or barn. And using a proprietary method from Los Alamos, we are able to test for multiple diseases at once by diminishing the signal from diseases not present and amplifying the signal from diseases present. This unique technology allows us to have several advantages. The first one is the ability to multiplex, which is the ability to test for multiple things at once. It's really useful to be able to do this because if you only test for one thing at a time, all you get is a yes/no decision. And if it's no, but your pig is still sick, you're still left in the dark about what's going on. By testing for the most common things, we get them all out of the way right away. And so one of them is more likely to be a yes, even though there's several negatives. Additionally, it has the ability to be strain specific. This is important because not all strains of a virus are as dangerous as others. Think of the Omicron or Delta variants for COVID compared with the original strain, and you can understand that some of these are just much more important to catch early. And finally, it's a molecular test similar to PCR, and so it provides that additional accuracy, leaving the reliability of the lab, but on the comfort of the farm. Our business model starts with consumable test sales. Each chip is meant to be a single test run and then consumed. And so the main sales come from the consumable test sales sold over and over for each run. But there's two other sides to the revenue pyramid that are important, and that's hardware and data. On the hardware side, we'll of course have device sales, with each farm needing probably one, maybe several for larger farms. But then the additional service and maintenance on those devices in order for proper use. On the data side, we'll be providing consulting both on how to use the device, but also in what to do after results in terms of farm health management. And then finally, we can use the data from multiple farms and collect it together for use in epidemiological studies or in other data-driven research. We plan to start in the US domestic market with a particular beachhead in the boar market. So boars are very important for the system, and they need to be tested constantly for health, including results needing as close to real time as possible. And so that's a great beachhead for us to prove in this small market niche that we are reliable and all the other benefits that we provide. And then we can use that to help fuel our growth in total domestic market before moving on to the global market. The global market in particular needs a lot of these solutions because their testing infrastructure is not nearly as good as the US. And so a lot of areas have basically no testing at all. Thinking of our competitors, it's important to think of them in sort of two broad categories, either ELISA or PCR. For ELISA, those are tests that can be performed on the farm, but they usually have very poor sensitivity and accuracy. Some companies that do ELISAs include Zoetis and IDEX. For PCR, there are several companies that do it. Diagnostic labs such as Iowa State or Minnesota will actually run the tests, but the tests are manufactured by various manufacturing companies, with Thermo Fisher capturing most of the market for the manufacturing. PCR is very sensitive, very accurate, but as mentioned before, the turnaround time is over 24 hours. Pignostics provides turnaround in almost as fast as an ELISA test, with sensitivity much closer to that of a PCR. Additionally, Pignostics can provide multiplexing, the testing for multiple diseases, which means buying extra kits in either an ELISA or a PCR format. And finally, we can also provide the strain typing, the ability to seek out those dangerous variants, which ELISA can't do at all, and PCR can only do with extra testing. We're still in a relatively early...
And we have about 1 minute left.
Okay. We're still in a relatively early technology readiness level, and so we'll need more time for benchtop prototypes before moving to field prototypes and field trials in summer to fall of 2023. And from there, we'll transition from a prototype to a manufactured product with sales expected in fall of 2024. Since we're so early in our development, what we're really asking for is additional customer discovery with vets, producers, and other industry leaders so we can help refine the product for the needs of the market. We're also looking to partner with vets or producers in order to do sample collection for our testing, and of course, business partners to help with product development and tech maturation opportunities. Quick blurb about me: I have a Ph.D. in bioengineering and 10 years in assay development and 2 years in infectious diseases. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, so we'll open it up to the panel for 5 minutes of questions, if we could.
Hey, Daniel, I'll jump in. So how many of these tests are there? You showed us a market size. How many is that, and what generally is the cost to the producer?
Are you asking how many per year are they generally running?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Iowa State generally does about 500,000 plus each year, just as a ballpark. And then as far as, and that's actually low because of some of the costs associated with it and things like that. There are recommendations from veterinarians and other industry leaders for sort of general levels of monitoring in terms of number of tests you should perform per 1,000 head. It's about 6 tests per 1,000 pigs in order to get a good feel on the health of the herd, and that should be done bi-weekly. So
What are they paying for those tests, like Iowa State, just as an example?
The Iowa State is $25 for the test with an additional $10 in administrative fees and $15 for the overnight shipping. And that's pretty standard across the country. They have a deal with UPS where most of the diagnostic labs have a $15 flat shipping.
And that 750, so is that both the ELISA and the PCR number?
Yeah, that's based on just the sheer number of tests that are performed, period.
Okay, that's helpful. I'd like a little bit more information. So, obviously this is a business model. I think we're all incredibly familiar with these days because of the COVID test, the rapid test versus the PCR,
Yep.
Et cetera. And so we're all kind of getting familiar with sensitivity and turnaround time. Could you talk a little bit more again about the turnaround time and that 24 hours and what that's costing the industry?
Yeah, so the turnaround time, I mean, the 24 hours, the biggest part of it is just the method of how you have to do it now. When they're there, the veterinarians have to come there. They usually collect the samples. They'll probably visit several farms over the course of a day. And so then they ship all the samples as sort of the last thing they do in the day. And then that goes overnight to Iowa State. And then it takes them, 6 to 8 hours to run the test because they have a high throughput. It just takes a while.
Right. No, I actually was talking more about what it means for the herd,
Yeah.
So the importance again of that. And so therefore, why the on-site test is really what you're going for.
Yeah. The cost is the ability to monitor the health of the herd in closer to real time. They have a lot of ability to connect with each other. And it sort of depends on how open you're leaving the herd at that time. And so you don't want to necessarily be shutting down your herd every other day. And you need to know when cases are starting to rise so that you know when to shut things down more versus leave it open. And so they have in the system, there's sort of different levels of pig interaction. And basically they have, a pen, which is closer to like a family unit or a close circle. And then they have larger levels like the barn level or the area and zone level. And those are basically like wider and wider circles of interaction in the human population. And so those are always happening. Those interactions are always happening. And the farmers need to know when to control certain parts of that to try and mitigate disease increase. Did that answer?
You finished? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I've looked at a few companies in the cow farming space, and a lot of the legacy type businesses are not necessarily open to changing their existing processes. Have you had discussions with pig farmers, and what's their openness to changing their existing process?
Yeah, it definitely is a big issue in the industry. I've talked most often with veterinarians, but they certainly talk about the difficulty in getting farmers to change their minds sometimes. I've also talked with a few farmers who express that. And basically the key ones to focus on are the veterinarians and the other people who are consulting on the health, because if they help impose, help say like, this is the best way to take care of your animals, then it helps the farmers be more ready for adoption. And so it's certainly a struggle, and it's one we're going to have to work with. But the current idea is that the veterinarians, they're called in for all sorts of health consultations. Most of them, besides just diagnosis treatment, have a major consultation branch to what they do, and that's actually in a lot of cases the bulk of what they do. And so convincing them that it's a good technology and worth investing in is the start to helping convince farmers.
Got it. Okay. So your go-to-market strategy then would be to target the veterinarians first.
As influencers, the companies and the farmers would be the ultimate decision makers. Unfortunately, at least at the moment, we can't get it in the vet's car just because of the sensitivity of going over roads and stuff. It's harder to have a machine maintain its integrity if you're driving around in the car all day. But it's certainly something we're also looking into, is the ability to have the vets themselves be purchasers.
Okay, thank you.
Daniel,
All
I
right,
guess,
well, we're
can I
running a
just
little
one
bit
more
behind time,
question?
so why don't you do one last question, Mike, and then we'll.
Yeah, just
close
a
up
quick
the
one. This,
section.
and Daniel, this isn't a question, but you know, as I'm sitting here listening to you, you're potentially disrupting a revenue stream for the vets, you know, giving an option for the, you know, the farmers to actually run these tests themselves on the one hand, and then you have, you know, sort of a farmer adoption on the other, as Matthew's described. You know, it's a complex interplay there. And I mean, I know you know this, but it just, you know, I think that didn't really come out in your presentation. The real economics behind this likely right now is to the vet, it sounds like. In other words, they have to make a site, they have to go on site, run a test, charge the farmer, and then there's testing on top of that. So you kind of miss that cost in the equation, which, you know, might be the motivator, as Matthew mentioned, you know, to get a farmer actually motivated to do this. Is there could be a dramatic cost difference, not just a cheaper potential test. Anyway, not really a question, but just more observation.
Yeah, I'll look into that more. You're right. It would definitely change how vets do their jobs, and that's it could change for the better for them. So that's something.
Well, it might be a negative too, right? I mean, that may be a revenue stream that they enjoy. So yeah, you might get resistance on the thought leader side. Anyway, sorry to go on and on, but just kind of sitting here thinking about that as you're presenting.
Yeah, it'll probably still involve site visits because a lot of it requires sort of a visual diagnosis as well. But yeah, it's definitely potentially disruptive to get the device on the farm and change how it's done.
All right, well, thank you, Dan. And with that, we'll wrap it up, this section of the Innovate New Mexico. So